My family erased me from Christmas before I even knew what hit me. No discussion, no warning, just my mother's voice on the phone, cold and matter-of-fact. Your sister needs this holiday to be perfect for her new boyfriend. Having you there would complicate things. I was standing in my kitchen, dish towel in my hand, the smell of coffee still warm in the air when the line went dead. I didn't cry. I didn't shout into the silence. I just stood there, staring at the counter like it might offer me some kind of explanation. I thought that was the worst of it. But 2 days later, they showed up at my door, furious, entitled, demanding, and her boyfriend looked at me and said something that shattered everything they built. My name is Savannah Monroe. I'm 31 years old, and I spend most of my time covered in sawdust and paint, restoring old furniture in a warehouse workshop on the edge of town. People say I don't look like someone who works with her hands. Long dark hair that falls past my shoulders, brown eyes that tend to give away more emotion than I'd like, and a face that somehow stays soft even when there's varnish under my nails. But appearances have never mattered to the people who should have seen me clearly. To my family, I was always the one who could fix things, never the one who deserved to be celebrated. I grew up in a house where image was currency. My mother, Patricia Monroe, treated our family like a brand she was building from the ground up. Every photograph had to be perfect. Every story had to be polished. Every smile had to be rehearsed. And standing next to my younger sister, Juliet, the family's shining centerpiece, I was always the backdrop, the shadow that made her light look brighter. Juliet had the kind of beauty that turned heads. Blonde hair that caught the sun just right, green eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and a confidence that filled every room she entered. She worked in marketing for a high-end boutique firm, the kind of place where everyone wore designer labels and spoke in buzzwords. She was everything my mother wanted in a daughter: polished, poised, and profitable. My father, Richard, played along without question. To him, Juliet was the success story, the daughter worth bragging about at dinner parties. And me? I was useful, practical, handy, he'd say, like I was a toolbox he kept in the garage. When something broke, they called me. When Juliet needed help moving apartments, I drove 3 hours in the rain. When my parents couldn't afford to fix the fence after a storm, I showed up with wood and nails and rebuilt it myself. I gave and gave and gave. And somewhere along the way, I forgot to leave anything for myself. My workshop became my sanctuary. The old warehouse sat on the outskirts of Portland, tucked between a rail yard and a stretch of empty fields. Inside, it smelled like cedar and linseed oil. The floors were stained with decades of work, and the light came through tall, dusty windows in soft golden beams. I specialized in restoration, taking broken, forgotten furniture and bringing it back to life. Antique dressers, worn dining tables, chairs that had seen generations of family dinners. I gave them new purpose, and in return, they gave me peace. Furniture didn't judge me. It didn't compare me to Juliet. It didn't ask me to shrink myself to make someone else feel bigger. It just existed, honestly, waiting for someone to care enough to see its worth. So when my mother called me 2 weeks before Christmas and told me I wasn't welcome at the family gathering, it hurt. A deep, hollow hurt that settled in my chest like a stone. But it wasn't a shock. She used the same smooth, controlled tone she always used when delivering bad news, like she was informing me of a schedule change instead of cutting me out of the most important holiday of the year. "Juliet is bringing someone very special this year," she'd said. "His name is Connor Blake, and he comes from a very prominent family. This is a big moment for her, and we need everything to be appropriate." Appropriate. That word had haunted me my entire life. "What does that have to do with me?" I'd asked, even though I already knew the answer. There was a pause, the kind that spoke louder than words. "Juliet feels that having you there might send the wrong message. You know how you can be, Savannah. A little too rough around the edges." I tightened my grip on the dish towel. my knuckles going white. "I'm your daughter, and we love you," she said quickly, like that made it okay. "But this is about Juliet's future. Surely you can understand that." I hung up without saying goodbye. For a long time, I just stood there in my kitchen, the silence pressing against my ears. Outside, the December rain tapped against the windows, steady and cold. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet realization. A lock finally turning after years of being stuck. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead for a seat at a table that had never truly been set for me. I was going to let it go, and maybe, just maybe, I was going to build something better. The next morning, I woke to the sound of pounding on my front door, hard, insistent, demanding. I stumbled out of bed, still in my oversized sweatshirt and leggings, hair loose and tangled, and opened the door to find my entire family standing on my porch. My mother, my father, Juliet, and a man I didn't recognize but immediately understood to be Connor Blake. All four of them looked furious, their faces tight with indignation, their breath fogging in the cold morning air. My mother didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Why did you tell people you weren't invited?" I blink, still half awake. "I didn't tell anyone." "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "Your aunt called last night asking why you wouldn't be at Christmas. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" Humiliating. The same word she'd used about me potentially ruining Juliet's big moment. My father stepped forward, shaking his head like I was a problem he thought he'd already solved. "You always do this, Savannah. You twist things. You make us look like villains." Juliet stood beside him, wrapped in a long white coat that looked like it had never seen rain or dirt. She looked at me with barely concealed contempt. "I can't believe you're doing this right now. Do you know how stressful this holiday already is for me?" "Stressful?" I echoed, my voice flat. "Yes, stressful," she said, her voice rising. "I'm trying to make a good impression, and you're out here playing the victim." I didn't respond. I just stood there, letting their words pile up like bricks, building a wall between us that had been under construction my entire life. That's when Connor spoke. "Wait," he said slowly, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. "Savannah Monroe?" The porch went silent. Juliet's head snapped toward him. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Connor stepped closer, ignoring her. He was tall, clean-cut, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. But his expression wasn't angry. It was curious, almost stunned. "You're the Savannah Monroe who restored that Victorian settee that went viral on the design forums?" he said. "The one with the hand-carved lion's feet." And my breath caught, not because he recognized me, but because my family clearly had no idea what he was talking about. Juliet's mouth fell open. "What? No, she just fixes old furniture." Connor shook his head, his gaze steady on me. "She doesn't just fix it, she transforms it. I've been following her work for over a year. Her craftsmanship is extraordinary." My father scoffed. "You're joking." My mother frowned, the carefully constructed narrative she'd built, cracking at the edges. Juliet flushed a deep red, the kind that starts at the collarbone and spreads upward when control slips away. Connor looked at me with something close to admiration. "Your attention to detail is incredible. The way you preserve the original integrity while making each piece functional again, it's art." And just like that, the family hierarchy crumbled. Juliet's perfect image wavered. My mother's script fell apart. My father's certainty shattered. For the first time in my life, someone in their world was looking at me, not as a tool, not as an inconvenience, but as someone who mattered, and they hated it. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. The silence on my porch stretched until it felt like the cold itself was holding its breath. My mother recovered first, stepping in front of Connor with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, that's very nice," she said, her voice tight. "But we didn't come here to discuss Savannah's hobbies. We came because we need to talk about family responsibilities." Responsibilities. That word had been an anchor around my neck for as long as I could remember. My father cleared his throat, already moving on from Connor's revelation like it had never happened. "The water heater is acting up again. We need you to come look at it this weekend." Juliet followed immediately, her voice sharp and expectant. "And I need to borrow money. I'm hosting a holiday party for work next week. And the venue cost more than I budgeted. Can you transfer $1,500 by Friday?" I stared at her, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. "You're asking me for money after uninviting me from Christmas?" She rolled her eyes like I just said something melodramatic. "Oh my God, don't be so sensitive. This is separate. I can't show up to a work event looking cheap. It reflects badly on me." My mother nodded sharply. "Family helps family, Savannah. Or have you forgotten that?" I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp it cut. They hadn't come to apologize. They hadn't come to explain. They came to collect. Connor's eyes moved slowly from them to me, his expression shifting from confusion to something that looked like dawning horror. "You're serious?" he asked quietly. "After everything you just said to her?" My father's voice turned hard. "This is a family matter. It doesn't concern you." But Connor didn't back down. He looked at me with a directness I wasn't used to. "Is this normal? Do they always treat you like this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was written all over my face. Juliet threw her hands up in frustration. "Can we please focus? Savannah, I really need that money. And Dad already told everyone you'd fix the water heater. Don't make us look bad." There, it was again. Image. Always image. Never substance. Never care. Something inside me clicked into place, like a lock finally turning after years of resistance. "No," I said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was calm, steady, and final. My mother blinked. "What did you say?" "I'm not fixing the water heater," I repeated. "I'm not giving you money. I'm not doing any of it anymore." Silence fell like a hammer. My father stepped forward, his face darkening. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done?" I cut him off, my voice still quiet but firm. "You mean raising me? That wasn't a favor. That was your job." Juliet gaped at me. "You're being ridiculous. You always help." "Not anymore." My mother's voice rose, thin and sharp. "We raised you. We gave you everything. And I'm grateful," I said calmly. "But that doesn't mean I owe you the rest of my life." The wind picked up, rattling the bare branches of the trees in my yard. The cold bit at my cheeks, but I didn't move. I stood there, grounded in my own doorway for the first time in my life, feeling like it truly belonged to me. Connor exhaled slowly, and I heard something like relief in the sound. "Good for you," he murmured, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Juliet whipped around to face him. "Why are you taking her side?" He looked at her evenly. "Because she's not wrong." The balance shifted. My mother's cheeks flushed, my father's fists clenched at his sides. Juliet's eyes filled with a fury I'd never seen directed at anyone but me. "You'll regret this," my father said, his voice low and threatening. But I didn't feel fear. I felt something else rising inside me. Something quiet and powerful and long overdue. Boundaries. "Leave," I said. They didn't move at first. Then Connor stepped back, not toward them, but closer to me. It broke whatever invisible hold they thought they still had. They left in a flurry of indignation and slammed car doors, snow beginning to fall lightly as they drove away. I stood in the doorway, my breath steady, my heart strangely calm, and I knew that a line had been drawn, a line that couldn't be erased. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. My phone stayed silent, no calls, no texts, no sudden emergencies that required my immediate attention. At first, I kept checking, expecting the usual demands to come flooding back, but they never did. It was strange, that silence. Not peaceful, not yet, but something close to it. Like the air after a storm, still heavy, but clearing. I threw myself into work. A woman named Delilah brought in a mahogany armoire that had belonged to her grandmother. The wood was cracked, the hinges rusted, the veneer peeling in long, sad strips. But underneath, the bones were strong. I spent days sanding it down, replacing the damaged pieces, refinishing it with a deep, rich stain that brought out the grain. When Delilah came to pick it up, she cried. She ran her fingers over the surface and said, "It's like having her back." That's what I loved about restoration. It wasn't about making something new. It was about honoring what had always been there, hidden under years of neglect. I started spending more time at the community center downtown. It was an old brick building that smelled like coffee and worn carpet. And every Saturday, they ran a workshop where people could come learn basic carpentry and furniture repair. Most of the participants were older folks, retirees looking for a hobby. But there were a few younger people too. College students, single parents, people just looking for something to do with their hands. And I volunteered to teach a class on wood finishing. It was small, maybe 8 people, but they listened. They asked questions. They laughed when I told stories about the terrible mistakes I'd made when I first started. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something that mattered. Not for my family, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. One of the students, a woman named Grace, stayed after class one day. She was in her mid-50s with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I haven't felt this excited about something in years." I smiled. "I'm glad you're enjoying it." "It's more than that," she said. "My husband passed away 2 years ago, and I've been lost. But working with my hands, creating something, it feels like I'm finding pieces of myself again." Her words stayed with me long after she left, because that's exactly what I've been doing too. Finding pieces of myself. Pieces I'd buried under years of trying to be what my family needed instead of who I actually was. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone in my workshop, refinishing a set of dining chairs I'd found at an estate sale. The radio played old holiday songs, and I drank hot chocolate spiked with peppermint schnapps. It wasn't sad. It wasn't lonely. It was mine. On New Year's Eve, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Savannah. This is Connor Blake. I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I wanted to apologize for what happened at your door that day. I also wanted to ask if you'd be open to meeting for coffee sometime. No pressure. Just thought it might be good to talk." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me didn't trust it. But another part, a small, curious part, wondered what he wanted to say. I texted back, "Coffee is fine. When?" We met at a small cafe near the river on a gray January morning. Connor was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. I wasn't sure how you took it," he said, gesturing to the cups, "so I got 1 black and 1 with cream and sugar." I sat down and took the one with cream. "Thank you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, the river moved slowly, gray and cold under the winter sky. "I broke up with Juliet," Connor said finally. I looked up at him, surprised. "Because of what happened?" "Partly," he admitted. "But mostly because of what I saw. The way they treated you. The way she treated you. I couldn't unsee it. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. She probably hates me, even more now. She blames you, yes, he said, but that's not your fault. None of it is. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Connor leaned forward, slightly. I've been following your work for a long time, Savannah. I wasn't lying when I said that. You have a gift, and watching your family dismiss it like it was nothing, it made me realize I was dismissing things too. Juliet's behavior, the way she talked about people, the way she talked about you. You didn't know, I said quietly. I should have asked more questions, he said. I should have paid attention. We talked for over an hour, about furniture, about family, about the strange relief that comes from walking away from something that was slowly suffocating you. Connor told me about his own family, wealthy, demanding, obsessed with appearances. He understood in his own way what it was like to be valued for what you could provide instead of who you were. When we finally stood to leave, he hesitated. Would it be okay if I stayed in touch? Not as anything romantic, just as someone who gets it. I smiled. I'd like that. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building a life that wasn't weighed down by people who only saw me as useful. Winter melted into spring. The workshop stayed busy. My classes at the community center grew. I started posting more of my work online, not for validation, but because people asked. The messages came in slowly at first, then faster. People from across the country reaching out, asking if I took commissions, sharing their own restoration stories, thanking me for inspiring them to try. I hired an assistant, a young woman named Marlo who just graduated from art school and didn't know what to do with her degree. She was quiet, thoughtful, and had an eye for color that I didn't. We worked well together, the kind of partnership that didn't need a lot of words. In April, I got a call from my Aunt Diane, my mother's sister. We haven't spoken in years. I heard what happened, she said, with Christmas. I tensed. Did my mother tell you her version? She did, Diane said. But I also talked to Connor, and I wanted you to know I believe you. Those 4 words cracked something open inside me. I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner, she continued. I knew your mother could be difficult, but I didn't realize how bad it was. I should have checked on you. It's okay, I said, even though it wasn't. Not really. No, it's not, Diane said firmly. But I'd like to try to do better, if you'll let me. We started talking regularly after that. Diane was different from my mother, warmer, more grounded, less concerned with what people thought. She invited me to lunch. She asked about my work. She listened. Yeah, it wasn't a replacement for the family I'd lost, but it was something, a thread of connection that wasn't tangled in obligation and resentment. By summer, my workshop had become more than just a place where I worked. It had become a gathering spot. Grace and a few of the other students from the community center started dropping by on weekends, working on their own projects, sharing tools, drinking iced tea in the yard behind the warehouse. Marlo invited her friends, artists and makers who didn't have studio space. Slowly, organically, it became a community. One Saturday in July, we threw an open house. We set up tables outside, displayed finished pieces, offered free mini lessons on basic repair. Families came. Older couples, college kids, people I'd never met but who'd seen my work online. Connor stopped by too, bringing pastries from a bakery downtown. He'd started seeing someone new, he told me. Someone kind, someone who made him laugh. I'm happy for you, I said, and I meant it. I'm happy for you too, he said, looking around at the crowd. You built this. I had not out of spite, not to prove anything to my family, but because I'd finally given myself permission to build something that reflected who I actually was. I didn't hear from my parents or Juliet for months, and honestly, I didn't expect to. I'd made my choice, and they'd made theirs. The The silence was mutual, and in a strange way, it was a relief. But in late November, as the holidays approached again, I got a letter in the mail. The return address was my parents' house. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single handwritten note from my mother. "Savannah, we'd like to invite you to Thanksgiving this year. We've had time to reflect, and we think it's important for the family to be together. Please let us know if you'll come." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just an invitation, phrased like a business meeting. I read it 3 times, waiting to feel something. Anger maybe, or hurt. But all I felt was tired. I didn't respond. Instead, I spent Thanksgiving at the community center, helping serve meals to people who didn't have anywhere else to go. Grace was there. Marlo was there. Aunt Diane came too, bringing homemade pies. We laughed. We ate. We shared stories. And when the day was over, I drove home to my quiet house, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the things I'd built, the life I'd chosen. I didn't miss them, not the way I thought I would. I missed the idea of them, the family I'd wanted them to be. But the reality? The reality was something I'd finally let go of. And I was okay. December arrived with the kind of cold that settles into your bones and stays there. The warehouse windows frosted over at night, and I started keeping a space heater running in the corner of the workshop. The holiday season always brought a rush of orders, people wanting family heirlooms restored in time for Christmas, last-minute gifts that carried more meaning than anything store-bought ever could. I was in the middle of stripping paint from an old secretary desk when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Savannah Monroe?" A woman's voice, professional, warm. "Speaking. My name is Simone Reeves. I'm a producer for a home design show called Reclaimed. We feature artisans who specialize in furniture restoration and sustainable design. Your work came across my desk, and I'd love to talk to you about potentially featuring you in an upcoming episode." I stood there, paintbrush in hand, trying to process what I was hearing. "I'm sorry, what?" Simone laughed. "I know it's out of the blue, but your portfolio is stunning. The Victorian settee, the mahogany armoire, that arts and crafts dining set you posted last month. Your craftsmanship is exactly what we're looking for. Would you be interested in discussing this further?" I set the brush down carefully. Yes, I would. We talked for 20 minutes. She explained the concept of the show, the timeline, what filming would look like. It wasn't a huge production, more of a documentary-style series that aired on a niche design network, but it had a loyal following. People who cared about craftsmanship, sustainability, history. "We'd want to film over the course of a week," Simone said. "Show your process, hear your story, see the community you've built. From what I can tell, you're not just restoring furniture, you're restoring connection." When I hung up, I sat down on my work stool and just breathed. Marlo walked in a moment later carrying coffee. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you just saw a ghost." "I think I just got offered a spot on a TV show," I said, still half disbelieving. Her eyes went wide. "Are you serious?" "I think so." She let out a whoop that echoed off the rafters and pulled me into a hug. "Savannah, that's incredible." It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. But as the shock wore off, something else settled in. Pride. Not the boastful kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you've built something real. Filming happened in early January. The crew was small. Simone, a cameraman named Marcus, and a sound technician named Priya. They spent a week at the workshop, capturing me as I worked on a walnut credenza that had been water damaged in a basement flood. They filmed the classes at the community center. They interviewed Grace, Marlo, even Aunt Diane. Simone asked me questions I'd never been asked before. Not about my family or why I'd chosen this work, but about what I saw when I looked at a broken piece of furniture. what I felt when I brought it back to life. I see potential, I told her. I see something that was made with care, that was loved once, and just needs someone to believe it's worth saving. She smiled. I think that's true for more than just furniture. The episode aired in March. I watched it alone in my living room, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a mug of tea. Seeing myself on screen was strange. My voice sounded different. My hands looked more capable than I felt. But the story they told was honest. They didn't sensationalize. They didn't dramatize. They just showed the work, the care, the community. The response was overwhelming. My email inbox flooded with messages. People wanting to commission pieces, people asking for advice, people sharing their own stories of walking away from toxic families and rebuilding their lives. The phone rang constantly. My website crashed twice in the first week. Marlo helped me sort through it all, setting up a waitlist, organizing inquiries, creating systems so I didn't drown in the sudden attention. Connor sent flowers with a card that read, "Proud of you. You deserved this." Aunt Diane called, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew you were talented, but seeing it like that, Savannah, I'm just so proud." Even Grace stopped by with a bottle of champagne. "You're famous now," she teased. "I'm not famous," I said, laughing. "I'm just visible." And that was the truth. For the first time in my life, I was being seen for who I actually was, not who someone needed me to be. But visibility comes with a price. 3 weeks after the episode aired, I got a call from Juliet. I stared at her name on the screen for a long time before answering. "Hello?" I said. "Savannah." Her voice was tight, controlled. "I saw your episode." I waited. "It's impressive," she said, though the words sounded like they hurt coming out. "You've really built something." "Thank you." A pause. Then, "I wanted to talk to you about Mom and Dad." My stomach tightened. "What about them?" "They're struggling," Juliet said, "financially. The water heater finally broke completely, and the roof needs repairs. Dad's been out of work for 2 months. Mom's too proud to ask, but they need help." There it was, the reason for the call. "And you thought I should know this because you're doing well now," Juliet said, her tone edging toward accusation. "You have opportunities. You could help them." I closed my eyes. "Juliet, I haven't spoken to them in over a year. They made it very clear I wasn't part of the family." "That was a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "They've changed. We've all changed." "Have you?" I asked quietly. Silence. "I can't do this," I said. "I'm sorry they're struggling, but I can't fix this for them. That's not my job anymore." "So you're just going to abandon them?" Her voice rose. "After everything they did for you? Everything they did for me?" I repeated, the old anger stirring. "Juliet, they cut me out of Christmas because I embarrassed you. They showed up at my door demanding money and repairs without a single apology. They've spent my entire life making me feel like I wasn't enough. And now that I've finally built something for myself, you want me to tear it down to save them?" "There are parents," she said, her voice breaking. "Pete, and I'm their daughter," I said, "but that doesn't mean I owe them everything." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I set the phone down and walked outside into the cold March air, letting the wind clear my head. I knew this moment would come eventually. I knew that the distance I'd created wouldn't last forever, that someone would try to pull me back into the old patterns. But I also knew, with a certainty that felt like bedrock, that I wasn't going back. I'd spent too many years being the family's safety net. I'd given too much of myself, trying to earn a love that should have been freely given. And I was done. Spring arrived slowly. The orders kept coming, more than I could handle on my own. I hired 2 more assistants, a recently retired carpenter named Felix and a young man named Desmond, who'd learned woodworking in prison and was trying to rebuild his life. The workshop became a place of second chances, not just for furniture, but for people. We started hosting open workshops twice a month, free for anyone who wanted to learn. People came from all over, teenagers, elderly folks, people struggling with grief or loss, or just looking for a reason to get out of the house. We worked side by side, sanding and staining and laughing, building tables and chairs and hope. In May, Simone called again. "We want to do a follow-up episode," she said. "Show how things have grown since the first piece aired. Would you be interested?" Pause. Absolutely. The second episode filmed in June. This time, they captured the community workshops, the expanded space, the people whose lives had been touched by the work we were doing. They interviewed Felix about finding purpose in retirement. They talked to Desmond about learning a trade that gave him dignity. They filmed Grace teaching a class on furniture repair, her face glowing with pride. And they asked me, again, what it all meant. "I think we all want to matter," I said. "We want to know that what we do has value, that we're not just taking up space." Furniture restoration taught me that broken things aren't worthless. They just need someone to see what they can become. And I think people are the same way. The episode aired in August. The response was even bigger than before. More orders, more messages, more people wanting to be part of what we were building. But the call I wasn't expecting came from my father. His voice on the phone was different, smaller, somehow, tired. "Savannah, it's Dad." I didn't say anything. "I know I don't have the right to ask," he continued, "but I wanted to talk to you, in person, if you're willing." Every instinct told me to say no, but there was something in his voice, not manipulation. Not anger, just exhaustion, and maybe a little bit of regret. "Okay," I said finally, "but not at your house. There's a cafe downtown, Riverview, tomorrow at 2. I'll be there." I hung up and sat in the silence of my workshop, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. The next day, I arrived at Riverview early and chose a table by the window. The river moved lazily outside, reflecting the summer sun. When my father walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd aged. His shoulders slumped in a way they never had before, and there were new lines around his eyes. He sat down across from me without ordering anything. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. I nodded but didn't speak. He took a breath, and I could see how hard this was for him. "I saw your show, both episodes." "Okay." "You've built something remarkable." He looked down at his hands, and I realized watching it that I never really saw you. Not the way I should have. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my face neutral. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he continued. "I'm not asking for anything, really. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong. About you. About what mattered. I spent so much time worrying about what people thought, about keeping up appearances, that I forgot to actually see my own daughter." "Why now?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. "Because I'm ashamed. Because I watched you on that show, talking about broken things being worth saving, and I realized I never made you feel like you were worth saving. I made you earn every scrap of approval, and even then, it was never enough." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Your mother and Juliet, they don't see it yet. They're still caught up in the same patterns. But I see it now, and I wanted to tell you, even if it doesn't change anything." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, people walked along the riverfront, living their lives, unaware of the small fracture that was beginning to heal at this table. "I don't know if I can have you back in my life," I said finally. "Not the way things were." "I understand," he said. "But maybe," I hesitated, "maybe we could start over, slowly, as two people getting to know each other, instead of as father and daughter carrying all that history." He looked at me with something like hope. "I'd like that." We talked for another hour, not about the past, not about my mother or Juliet, but about the present, about my work, about his struggles, about what it meant to try to change when you've been one way your whole life. When we finally stood to leave, he paused. "Can I hug you?" I nodded. It was awkward at first. We want people who hugged. But after a moment, it felt almost natural. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he said. "Don't make me regret it," I replied, but there was no malice in my voice. Just honesty. Over the next few months, my father and I met occasionally. Coffee, lunch, walks along the river. We didn't talk about my mother or Juliet. We didn't rehash old wounds. We just tried to build something new, something that wasn't weighed down by guilt and resentment. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when old patterns tried to resurface, when he'd say something that reminded me why I'd walked away in the first place. But he caught himself more often than not. And when he didn't, I told him. And he listened. I didn't know if my mother or Juliet would ever come around. Part of me hoped they would, but I wasn't holding my breath. Some people change, and some people don't. And I'd learned that I couldn't make them see me differently. I could only control how I saw myself. As autumn arrived and the leaves turned gold and crimson, I found myself standing in my workshop one evening, surrounded by projects in various stages of completion. The space hummed with life, not just the machines and tools, but the people who'd passed through, the hands that had learned here, the hope that had been rebuilt alongside battered dressers and broken chairs. Marlo was in the corner, sketching designs for a custom bookshelf. Felix was teaching Desmond how to repair a drawer joint. Grace had stopped by earlier, bringing soup she'd made and stories about her latest project. This was my family now, not the one I was born into, but the one I'd chosen, the one I built with intention and care. My phone buzzed, a text from Connor. "Dinner this weekend? There's someone I'd like you to meet." I smiled and texted back, "Sounds great." Another message came through, this one from Aunt Diane. "I'm bringing your cousin to the workshop Saturday. She wants to learn. Hope that's okay?" I replied, "More than okay. See you then." I set my phone down and looked around the workshop again, at the worn floors, the dusty windows, the pieces waiting to be transformed. This space had saved me, not because it gave me success or visibility, but because it gave me a place to remember who I was when I wasn't trying to be what someone else needed. I thought about the girl I'd been a year and a half ago, standing in her kitchen, holding a dish towel, listening to her mother tell her she wasn't good enough to sit at the family table. I thought about how small she'd felt, how invisible. And I wished I could go back and tell her, "You're going to be okay, better than okay. You're going to build something beautiful." The holidays approached again, and this time I didn't wait for an invitation that would never come. I planned my own celebration. I invited everyone, Marlo, Felix, Desmond, Grace, Aunt Diane, Connor and his girlfriend, my father, the students from the community center, anyone who wanted to come. We held it at the workshop on Christmas Eve. We strung lights from the rafters and set up long tables made from reclaimed wood. People brought food, casseroles and pies and dishes from a dozen different cultures. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought their kids. It was chaotic and imperfect and loud, and it was the most beautiful Christmas I'd ever had. My father came, looking nervous but genuine. He brought a bottle of wine and a small, wrapped box that he handed to me quietly. "You didn't have to," I started. "I wanted to," he said. Inside was a vintage wood plane, the kind used by craftsmen decades ago. The handle was smooth from use, the blades still sharp. "It was my grandfather's," he said. "I found it in the attic. I thought you should have it." I ran my fingers over the worn wood, feeling the weight of it, the history. "Thank you." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Merry Christmas, Savannah." "Merry Christmas, Dad." As the night wore on, I found myself standing near the doorway, watching everyone, watching them laugh and eat and belong. Grace was showing Desmond's daughter how to sand a piece of scrap wood. Marlo was deep in conversation with Connor's girlfriend about art and design. Felix was telling stories that had a group of teenagers doubled over with laughter. Period. This was what I've been searching for my whole life. Not perfection, not approval, Just connection. Real, messy, honest connection with people who saw me and chose to stay. Period. Connor found me by the door. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "I really am." He smiled. "You did good, Savannah. Look at what you built." I looked around the workshop, at the people, the lights, the warmth spilling out into the cold December night, and I felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. "Yeah," I said softly. I did. The night ended late, with hugs and promises to do it again next year. As people filed out into the snow, calling goodbyes over their shoulders, I stayed behind to clean up. Marlo stayed too, and together we wiped down tables and put away chairs. "That was perfect," she said. "It really was. Your family, your mom and sister, they have no idea what they're missing." I thought about that for a moment. Maybe not, but that's their loss, not mine. And I realized, saying it out loud, that I truly believed it. We finished cleaning and locked up the workshop. Outside, the snow was falling softly, covering everything in fresh white. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air, feeling the weight of the year settling around me like a blanket. I'd lost a family, but I'd gained something more valuable, myself. I'd learned that I didn't need anyone's permission to matter. I didn't need to earn love through service or sacrifice. I didn't need to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. I just needed to show up, do the work, and trust that the right people would see me for who I was. And they had. As I drove home through the quiet streets, snow swirling in my headlights, I thought about the broken furniture that passed through my workshop. How each piece came to me damaged, forgotten, dismissed as worthless. And how with time and care and attention, each one became something beautiful again. I'd done the same thing for myself. I'd taken the broken parts, the years of feeling inadequate, the relationships that hurt me, the voice in my head that said I'd never be enough, and I'd slowly, carefully restored them. Not by pretending the damage didn't exist, but by acknowledging it, honoring it, and then choosing to build something new. When I got home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the snow fall. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from my father. "Thank you for tonight. I know I don't deserve a place in your life, but I'm grateful you're letting me try. Love, Dad." I stared at the word love. He'd never said it before, not in all the years I was growing up, not in all the times I'd helped him, fixed things for him, shown up when he needed me. But he was saying it now. I didn't know if it was enough. I didn't know if we'd ever have a relationship that felt whole. But I knew it was something. A beginning, maybe. A small crack in the wall that had stood between us for so long. I texted back, "Thank you for coming. See you soon." And then I set my phone down and just sat there, in the quiet of my home, in the life I'd built from scratch. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. The months that followed brought more growth, more opportunities, more moments of grace I never expected. The workshop expanded again. We took over the adjacent warehouse space and turned it into a classroom with proper ventilation, better lighting, and room for more students. Simone called with news of a third episode, and then a fourth. The show wanted to turn our story into a recurring segment, checking in every few months to document the journey. "You've become something of an inspiration," she said. "People see themselves in your story, not just the furniture restoration, but the personal restoration. The courage it takes to walk away from toxicity and build something healthy." Local news picked up the story, then a national magazine. I did interviews, gave talks at design conferences, spoke at community centers about second chances and finding purpose. I never planned to become a public figure, but somehow, by just living my truth, I'd become one. And through it all, I kept doing the work, restoring furniture, teaching classes, building community, because at the end of the day, that's what mattered. Not the recognition, but the connection. Not the visibility, but the value of the work itself. My relationship with my father continued to evolve. We met regularly, sometimes with Aunt Diane joining us, creating a small pocket of family that felt safe. He started coming to the workshop occasionally, not to ask for anything, but just to watch, to learn, to see me in my element. One day, as he watched me work on a particularly stubborn piece, a water-damaged oak table that required painstaking repair, he said quietly, "I'm sorry I never saw this before. How talented you are, how much you care." I paused, brush in hand. "I'm sorry you didn't either. Do you think—" He hesitated. "Do you think your mother will ever understand?" I thought about that. I don't know, maybe, but I can't wait for her to. I can't put my life on hold hoping she'll change. He nodded. "That's fair." "Do you talk to her about me?" I asked. "Sometimes," he admitted. "She gets defensive. Juliet does too. They think you've become arrogant, that success has changed you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Success didn't change me. Boundaries did. "Pete, I know," he said. "I wish they could see that." "Pete, maybe someday they will," I said. "Or maybe they won't. Either way, I'm okay." And I was. That was the truth of it. I'd stopped waiting for their approval. I'd stopped measuring my worth by their standards. I'd found my own measure, my own value, my own sense of belonging. As the year drew to a close again, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. 2 years ago, I'd been standing in my kitchen, listening to my mother tell me I wasn't good enough to be part of the family. I'd felt small, invisible, worthless. Now I stood in my workshop, surrounded by people who chose to be there, doing work that mattered, living a life that felt authentically mine. The journey hadn't been easy. There were still hard days, moments when the old wounds ached, times when I questioned whether I'd done the right thing. But every time doubt crept in, I looked around at what I'd built. Not just the physical space, but the community, the connections, the life, and I knew I'd done more than survive. I'd flourished. On New Year's Eve, I hosted another gathering at the workshop. Smaller this time. Just the core group, Marlo, Felix, Desmond, Grace, Aunt Diane, Connor and his girlfriend, now fiancé, my father, and a few others who'd become constants in my life. We toasted at midnight, standing in a circle, glasses raised. "To second chances," Grace said. "To found family," Marlo added. "To courage," Connor said, looking at me. "To building something worth keeping," my father said quietly. I looked at each of them, these people who'd seen me at my worst and chosen to walk alongside me anyway. "To all of us," I said, "to the life we've built together." We clinked glasses, and as the new year began, I felt something I'd never felt before at the turn of a year. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind, but the solid, rooted kind. The kind that comes from knowing you've done the hard work, made the tough choices, and come out stronger on the other side. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the workshop one last time. I walked through the space slowly, running my hands over the workbenches, the tools, the pieces in progress. I breathed in the familiar smell of wood and oil and possibility. This space had saved me, but more than that, I'd saved myself. I'd chosen to walk away from a family that couldn't love me the way I deserved. I'd chosen to build something new, something honest, something real. And in doing so, I discovered the most important truth of all. I didn't need anyone's permission to matter. I didn't need anyone's validation to have worth. I was enough. I'd always been enough. I just needed to believe it. As I locked up the workshop and walked out into the cold January night, I looked up at the stars scattered across the clear sky. Somewhere out there, other people were walking away from families that hurt them, from situations that diminished them, from lives that felt too small. And I hoped they knew what I'd learned. It gets better. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. You rebuild. You find your people. You discover what you're capable of. When you're not spending all your energy trying to earn love that should have been freely given, you become who you were always meant to be. I got in my car and drove home through streets dusted with fresh snow. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, wholly, undeniably at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was mine. My choices, my boundaries, my life. And that was more than enough. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, you know how hard that first step is. But you also know, deep in your bones, that some spaces aren't meant to hold you. Some tables aren't built for your truth. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to simply let go. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. Thank you for listening to Savannah's story. Until next time, remember, you are worth more than the boxes others try to keep you in. You are worthy of being seen.